I'm Elijah. I'm 32 years old, and 5 years ago, my mother called me 3 days before Thanksgiving to tell me I was banned from coming home because my presence would upset my older brother. Before I tell you how that single phone call led to the most satisfying revenge at my wedding, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I read them all. Now let me take you back to that day, November 21st. I was standing in the middle of Logan Airport. The air smelled like stale coffee and floor wax. Around me, the terminal was a chaotic sea of people. Families were hugging, kids were screaming with excitement, and soldiers were coming home in uniform, greeted by weeping parents. The energy was electric. It was the holidays. Everyone had somewhere to go. I had a ticket in my hand. Boston to Connecticut. It wasn't a long flight, but I had booked it months in advance. I had used my hard-earned salary to buy expensive gifts. A cashmere scarf for my mother, a vintage watch toolkit for my father, and even a high-end leather briefcase for my brother Lucas. I was trying. God knows I was trying. My phone buzzed. It was Mom. I smiled. I actually smiled. I thought she was calling to ask if I wanted pecan or pumpkin pie. "Hey, Mom," I answered, shifting my carry-on bag to my other shoulder. "I'm just about to head through security. I'll be there by dinner." There was a silence on the other end. A cold, heavy silence that I knew too well. "Elijah," she said. Her voice wasn't warm. It was the voice she used when she was talking to a telemarketer she wanted to hang up on. "Don't get on the plane." I froze. People bumped into me, rushing past, but I felt like the floor had dropped out. "What? Is Dad okay? Is Lucas okay?" "Everyone is fine," she said quickly. "But Lucas, he's going through a hard time at work. He's very stressed. He says your questions about his job make him feel judged." I gripped the phone tighter. My knuckles turned white. "Mom, I haven't seen Lucas in 6 months. The last time we spoke, I just asked him how the merger was going. That's it. He doesn't want the drama, Elijah," she snapped. "He needs a peaceful holiday. He's the one carrying the weight of a big corporate job. You know how sensitive he gets. If you come, he's going to be on edge. So, Robert and I decided it's best if you just stay in Boston this year." I looked around the airport. I saw a father lift his little boy onto his shoulders. I saw a mother kissing her daughter's forehead. "You're uninviting me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I already bought the ticket. It's non-refundable. I have your gifts. We'll open gifts at Christmas," she said dismissively. "Maybe, if Lucas is feeling up to it. Just don't come, Elijah. Do this for the family. Do this for the family." That was the phrase. That was always the phrase. "What about me, Mom?" I whispered. "Where am I supposed to go?" "You're a grown man, Elijah. I'm sure you can find something to do. Goodbye." The line went dead. I stood there for 10 minutes, just standing. I felt like a ghost. I was invisible. My own mother had just chosen her 34-year-old son's stress over her younger son's existence. Lucas, the golden child. Lucas, who could do no wrong, even when he was drowning in debt and bad decisions. While I, the landscape architect who built a successful business from nothing, was treated like a nuisance. I turned around and walked out of the airport. I threw the non-refundable ticket into a trash can near the curb. Felt like I was throwing away a piece of myself. I didn't go back to my apartment. It was empty and cold. I couldn't bear the silence there. I drove. I drove aimlessly around Boston until the sun went down and the streetlights flickered on. The city was emptying out. Everyone was at home. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I pulled up to Harborview Grill. It was an old-school place near the water. Dark wood paneling, brass fixtures, the kind of place that smells like roast beef and old money. It was one of the few places open. I walked in. The warmth of the restaurant hit me, contrasting the chill in my bones. It was packed. Large tables were pushed together. 3 generations of families were passing bread baskets and laughing. "Table for one," I told the hostess. She looked at me with pity. That look. I hated that look. "Just one? On Thanksgiving? Just one?" I said, keeping my chin up. She led me to a small two-top table in the back, right next to the kitchen door. But it was also right next to a large, boisterous table of about 10 people. I sat down and ordered a whiskey. Neat. Then I ordered the turkey dinner. I tried to look at my phone, tried to look busy, like I was a businessman on a layover, not a son who had been rejected by his own blood. But I couldn't focus. I could hear the family next to me. There was an older couple at the head of the table. The man had silver hair and a laugh that shook his shoulders. The woman was elegant, wearing a string of pearls, but her eyes were kind. There were younger adults, maybe my age, and a few kids. "Pass the potatoes, Dad," one of the guys yelled. "Ask nicely or I'm eating them all," the older man joked. They were happy. Not Instagram happy. Real happy. They interrupted each other. They stole food off each other's plates. They looked like they actually liked each other. I looked down at my whiskey. The amber liquid blurred. I realized I was crying. I wiped my eyes quickly with the linen napkin, hoping no one saw. I was a 27-year-old man crying in a steakhouse. Pathetic. Young man. I froze. I looked up. The elegant woman from the big table was standing right there. She had a glass of wine in her hand and a concern in her eyes that I hadn't seen in, well, ever. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I'm just allergies. Dust." She didn't buy it. She pulled out the empty chair opposite me and sat down. She didn't ask permission. She just claimed the space. "I'm Margaret," she said, "and I have a rule. No one eats alone on Thanksgiving. Not when I'm in the room." "I'm Elijah," I said, wiping my face again. "I really don't want to intrude, Margaret. You have a lovely family." "They are lovely," she agreed, looking back at them. "Noisy, but lovely. And there is plenty of room. My husband, Arthur, ordered enough turkey to feed a small army. He always does." She looked at me, really looked at me. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. "Why are you here, Elijah?" she asked softly. I don't know why I told her. Maybe because I had been holding it in for 20 years. Maybe because a stranger is safer than family. "My mother called me at the airport," I said, my voice trembling. "She told me not to come home. My brother didn't want the drama." Margaret's eyes narrowed. A flash of steel appeared behind the kindness. "Drama? Yeah, that's what they call me. Drama. Because I exist." Margaret stood up. She reached out her hand. "Well, Elijah, their loss is our gain. Grab your drink. You're moving tables." I hesitated. "Are you sure? I don't want to make things awkward." "The only thing awkward," she said firmly, "is you sitting here by the kitchen door while we have an empty seat next to Arthur. He loves to talk, and everyone else at the table has heard his stories 1,000 times. You'd be doing me a favor." I stood up. My legs felt shaky. I followed the stranger to the big table. The older man, Arthur, looked up. He didn't look confused. He looked delighted. "Arthur," Margaret said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "This is Elijah. He's joining us." Arthur stood up. A tall, imposing man who moved with a grace that suggested power. He extended a hand the size of a catcher's mitt. "Welcome aboard, Elijah," he boomed. "Do you like dark meat or white meat? Because if you say white, you can have it all. I'm a leg man myself." The table erupted in laughter. Someone pulled out a chair. Someone else poured wine into a fresh glass. A plate of stuffing appeared in front of me before I even sat down. I looked around at these strangers. 10 minutes ago, I was an orphan. Now, I was sitting between a retired judge and a graphic designer named Ben, passing the cranberry sauce. "So, Elijah," Arthur said, cutting into his turkey, "what do you do for a living? Or are you a secret agent? You have that look." "I'm a landscape architect," I said. "I take dead spaces, brownfields, abandoned lots, and I turn them into parks. I bring things back to life." Arthur stopped chewing. He looked at me with genuine interest. "Restoration. That's noble work. Hard work. Takes vision." For the next 2 hours, nobody asked me why I was alone. Nobody judged me. They just included me. They asked about my favorite trees. They argued about football. They teased Ben about his new mustache. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't the drama. I was just Elijah. And as I looked at Margaret across the table, watching her smile at her family, I didn't know that she was the mother of the woman I would one day marry. I didn't know that this dinner was the first brick in the foundation of my new life. All I knew was that the turkey didn't taste like ash anymore. Tasted like hope. The dinner at Harborview Grill was loud, chaotic, and wonderful. But every time the laughter died down for a second, my mind drifted back. It was like a rubber band snapping back to an old wound. Sitting there, surrounded by the warmth of the Sterling family, the contrast with my own family, the Thatchers, was so sharp it physically hurt. Arthur Sterling was telling a story about his time on the bench. I learned quickly that he was a retired Superior Court judge, a man of the law. So the lawyer stands up, Arthur said, gesturing with his fork, and he says, "Your Honor, my client didn't steal the car. He simply borrowed it for an indefinite period without permission. Can you believe that?" The table roared with laughter. Arthur looked at me, engaging me. "Elijah, in your line of work, if you plant a tree on the wrong property line, is it borrowing the land?" "It's encroaching," I said, smiling, "and it usually leads to a lawsuit." "Exactly." Arthur slammed his hand on the table delightedly. "Precision matters. Integrity matters. Precision. Integrity." Words my father, Robert, had never understood. My mind flashed back to when I was 16. I had entered the Connecticut State Art Competition. It was a huge deal. I had spent 3 months working on a charcoal sketch of the old mill downtown. I worked on it every night after homework, my hands covered in black dust. I won first prize in the entire state. The award ceremony was on a Friday night. I remember running into the kitchen, waving the letter. "Mom, Dad, I won. You have to come. It's at the state capitol." My mother, Linda, didn't even turn around from the stove. "Friday? Oh, Elijah, I don't know. Lucas has his varsity football game on Friday." "But Mom," I pleaded, "Lucas sits on the bench. He barely plays. This is the state championship for art." "We can't miss a game, Elijah," my father said, hiding behind his newspaper. "It's about team spirit. We have to support your brother." They didn't come. I stood on that stage, holding my blue ribbon, the bright lights blinding me. I looked out into the audience, searching for them. Every other kid had parents cheering, taking photos with disposable cameras. I had no one. Later that night, when I got home, the house was dark. They were asleep. They hadn't even waited up to ask how it went. The next morning, I found out why. Lucas had scraped his knee sliding on the turf. A minor scrape. Mom had spent the evening icing it and making him hot cocoa. "You're so dramatic, Elijah," Mom had said when I confronted her. "It's just a drawing. Your brother was injured. Just a drawing. Elijah, you with us, son?" Arthur's voice pulled me back to the present. I blinked, realizing I had been staring at my mashed potatoes. "Sorry," I said. "I was just thinking about family." Margaret reached over and touched my hand. Her skin was soft, but her grip was firm. The hard kind of thinking, I'm guessing. "Yeah," I admitted. "My parents, they've never really seen me. It's always been about my brother. He's the golden child. I'm the spare parts." The table went quiet. Not an awkward quiet, but a respectful one. "I have a theory," Ben, the graphic designer with the mustache, said. He was Margaret's nephew. "Some parents view children as extensions of themselves. If the kid succeeds in the way they want, they love him. If the kid is his own person, they don't know what to do with him." "That sounds about right," I said. "Lucas, my brother, he's an executive. Or he tries to be. He plays the part. Expensive suits, expensive cars, big talk. My parents love that image. Me? I play in the dirt. I build parks. They think it's beneath them." "There is nothing beneath a man who builds," Arthur said, his voice deep and resonant. "You create legacy, Elijah. Trees outlive us all. That is a fine profession." I looked at Arthur. He meant it. My own father had asked me when I was going to get a real job until I was 30, even after I had my own firm and 6 employees. Yet here was a stranger validating my entire existence in 5 minutes. You know, Margaret said, pouring more wine. Arthur and I have a daughter, Sarah. She's in London right now, finishing her master's in urban planning. Urban planning? I perked up. That pairs well with landscape architecture. That's what I keep telling her. Margaret laughed. She's brilliant. Stubborn but brilliant. You remind me of her a little. That intensity in your eyes. The dinner wound down. The servers brought out pumpkin pie. I insisted on paying my share. I pulled out my wallet. Put that away, Arthur commanded. No, really, I imposed. Elijah, Arthur said, leaning in. You didn't impose. You enhanced. It's Thanksgiving. Money is no good here. Your company is the payment. I felt a lump in my throat. I wasn't used to this. I was used to everything being a transaction. With the Thatchers, love was transactional. Do this for us and we'll tolerate you. Be quiet and we won't scold you. As we put on our coats to leave, the reality of the cold Boston night waited outside. I had to go back to my empty apartment. The magic bubble was about to burst. Margaret handed me a card. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock. The Sterling Residence, Chestnut Hill. We do Sunday dinner every week, she said. 5 p.m. sharp. If you're late, you do the dishes. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Ben said, clapping me on the back. Trust me. Margaret's roast beef is worth the traffic. I looked at the card. Then I looked at Margaret. Why? I asked. You don't even know me. I know enough, she said. I know you were brave enough to come out to dinner alone rather than sit in misery. I know you have manners. And I know a good person when I see one. Don't let your past define your future, Elijah. You can choose your family. You can choose your family. I walked out of Harborview Grill that night into the biting November wind. But I didn't feel cold. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Lucas. Bro, heard Mom told you to stay put. Probably for the best. I've got a lot of heat on me right now with the SEC audit rumors. Need to keep the house calm. Catch you at Christmas, maybe. SEC audit rumors? So that was the stress. He was probably cooking the books or cutting corners, just like he cut corners in life. And my parents were shielding him, protecting him from my judgmental questions. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the business card in my other hand. I didn't reply to Lucas. I didn't call Mom to beg for forgiveness. I got into my truck, started the engine, and drove home. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the crushing weight of rejection. I felt the lightness of release. They had uninvited me. Fine. They didn't realize that by closing the door, they had forced me to find a new one, a better one. I placed Margaret's card on my dashboard. Sunday at 5 p.m. I would be there. 2 years. That's how long it takes to change a life completely if you're willing to do the work. I started going to the Sterling house every Sunday. At first, I felt like an imposter. I parked my muddy Ford F-150 next to Arthur's pristine sedan and felt like the gardener. But they never treated me that way. Arthur taught me chess in his study. Margaret taught me how to make her secret marinade. Ben and I became gym buddies. I stopped waiting for the Thatchers to call. And the funny thing is, they barely noticed. I'd get the occasional text from Mom, "Are you alive?" Or "Lucas got a new boat." I'd reply with one word, yes or nice. I was starving the beast. I stopped giving them the emotional reaction they fed on. Then Sarah came home. It was a rainy Sunday in March. I walked into the Sterling kitchen through the back door, shaking off my umbrella, carrying a bottle of wine. I turned the corner and literally collided with a woman. Red wine went everywhere. All over my shirt. All over her white blouse. "Oh my God!" I yelled. "I am so sorry." She looked down at her shirt, which now looked like a crime scene, then up at me. She had fierce green eyes and wet hair that was curling at the ends. "Well," she said, wiping a droplet of wine from her chin, "I guess I'm not wearing white to dinner." She didn't scream. She didn't freak out. She laughed. A deep, throaty laugh that made my knees weak. "I'm Elijah," I said, holding out a napkin uselessly. "The stray dog your parents took in." "I'm Sarah," she grinned. "The daughter who finally escaped London, whether just to get rained on by wine in Boston." That was it. I was a goner. Sarah and I were inseparable within a month. She was an urban planner and I was a landscape architect. We spoke the same language. We spent our dates walking through the city, pointing at ugly buildings and arguing about how to fix them. We talked about zoning laws as foreplay. It was nerdy, and it was perfect. About 6 months into our relationship, I got a promotion of sorts. My firm landed a massive contract to redesign the city's Central Park. It was a multi-million-dollar project. My salary was going to triple. I was finally moving into the big leagues. I wanted to tell someone. Instinctively, I picked up the phone to call my dad. Old habits die hard. "Hello," Robert answered. He sounded distracted. TV blaring in the background. "Dad, it's Elijah. I have big news. I just landed the Central Park contract. It's the biggest job in the city." "That's nice, Elijah," he said, clearly not listening. "Hey, listen, have you spoken to Lucas? He's asking if you can lend him $5,000. Just a short-term thing. His assets are frozen temporarily because of some misunderstanding with the bank." My heart sank. Not "congratulations." Not "I'm proud of you." Just "give your brother money." "No, Dad," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm not lending Lucas money. Again. He makes 3 times what I used to make. Where does it go?" "You don't have to be so selfish," my father huffed. "Family helps family. He's going through a divorce, for God's sake. His wife is taking him to the cleaners with this custody battle." "Lucas is getting divorced?" I asked. I didn't even know he was separated. "Yes, and he needs a good lawyer. That's why he needs the money." "Come on, Elijah. Be the bigger man." "I am being the bigger man," I said. "I'm the man who pays his own bills. Tell Lucas to sell his boat." I hung up. My hands were shaking. But this time it wasn't sadness. It was clarity. I turned to Sarah, who was sitting on the couch reading blueprints. She saw my face and immediately put the papers down. "Thatcher's?" she asked. "Thatcher's," I confirmed. "They want money for Lucas's lawyer." Didn't even hear a word about my contract. Sarah walked over and wrapped her arms around me. "You know Arthur is proud of you, right? He told the neighbor yesterday that his son-in-law is reshaping the city skyline. He called you his son-in-law, Elijah, and we aren't even engaged yet." I looked at her. "Let's fix that." "Fix what?" "The not engaged part." I proposed 2 months later. "Where else?" "Harborview Grill. Table 4. The same table where Margaret had found me crying over a turkey dinner. I rented out the whole back section. Arthur and Margaret were there. Ben was there. I got down on one knee. "Sarah," I said, holding a ring I had designed myself. Simple, elegant, timeless. "You and your family saved my life. You taught me that love isn't about what you can provide or how much stress you can save someone. It's about showing up. Will you show up for me? For the rest of our lives?" She said yes. The restaurant erupted in applause. Arthur popped a bottle of champagne that cost more than my first car. But later that night, as the adrenaline faded, the fear crept in. We were sitting on the balcony of the Sterling house, looking at the stars. "We have to plan the wedding," Sarah said, resting her head on my shoulder. "Yeah," I said, my stomach tightening. "What is it?" she asked. She knew me too well. "The invitations," I whispered. "The wedding program. The seating chart." "Sarah, I can't invite them. I can't invite my parents. If they come, they'll make it about Lucas. Or they'll criticize the venue. Or they'll just sit there looking disappointed that I'm not the one getting divorced." Sarah sat up. She looked me in the eye. "Then don't invite them." "It's not that simple," I said. "They're my parents, whatever that means. And on the invite, it says parents of the groom. If I leave it blank, everyone will ask questions. It'll look like I'm ashamed. Or that they're dead. You shouldn't be ashamed, Sarah said fiercely. They should be. Just then, the glass door slid open. Arthur stepped out. He was wearing his smoking jacket and holding a cigar. He had clearly been listening. Elijah, Arthur said. His voice was serious. Can I have a word? I stood up. Sure, Arthur. He walked over to the railing and looked out at the garden I had helped him design. I spent 40 years in family court, Arthur said. I dealt with custody, inheritance, divorce. I saw the ugliest parts of human nature. Blood makes you related, Elijah. Loyalty makes you family. He turned to face me. He looked nervous, which was rare for him. Margaret and I have been talking. We know you're struggling with the wedding details. We know you feel like an orphan. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. In this state, Arthur continued, his voice wavering slightly, there is a legal provision called adult adoption. It's rarely used, mostly for inheritance purposes or foster care aging out situations. But it exists. It severs the legal ties with biological parents and creates a new, permanent legal bond with the adoptive parents. My breath caught in my throat. I looked at the paper. It was a draft petition. We don't want to replace your history, Arthur said, but we would be honored, truly honored, if you would let us be your parents. Officially, on the invitation, on the birth certificate. In life, we want you to be a Sterling. I stared at him. Tears pricked my eyes. This man, this distinguished judge, was asking to adopt a 30-year-old man. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't asking for peace. He was asking for me. You want to adopt me? I choked out. We adopted you in our hearts the night you ate my turkey. Arthur smiled. We just want to make it legal. So, what do you say, son? I looked at Sarah. She was beaming, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I said. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Arthur pulled me into a hug that cracked my ribs. Welcome home, Elijah Sterling. I didn't know it then, but signing those papers would set off a chain reaction that would blow up my entire biological family. The storm was coming, and I was finally ready for it. The adoption hearing was private, dignified, and profound. It wasn't in a sterile courtroom, but in the chambers of one of Arthur's old colleagues, Judge Henderson. There was no drama, just a few signatures, a stroke of a pen, and Elijah Thatcher ceased to exist. Elijah Sterling was born. When the gavel hit the desk, tap, I felt a physical weight lift off my shoulders. It was a strange sensation. I had a new birth certificate being processed. I was now legally the heir to the Sterling estate, not that I cared about the money. What mattered was the inheritance of a name that meant something. Honor, respect, love. We celebrated with a quiet lunch. But as we toasted, a nagging thought pulled at me. The Thatchers didn't know. Do I tell them? I asked Arthur. You don't owe them a notification, Arthur said, sipping his iced tea. This is a public record, technically, but unless they go looking for it, they won't know. You are a free man. I don't want them crashing the wedding thinking they still have rights. We'll handle the wedding security, Ben promised. I've hired off-duty cops. If Lucas shows up trying to borrow money from the guests, he's getting tasered. We laughed, but I should have known better. Secrets in families like the Thatchers don't stay secret. They fester. The leak came from the most unlikely source. Aunt Patricia. Patricia was my father's sister. She was the only decent person in the Thatcher bloodline. She had sent me birthday cards when my parents forgot. She had tried to defend me when I was a kid, only to be shouted down by Linda. I had sent her an invitation. Just her. I wanted her there. A week after the invitations went out. Beautiful, heavy cardstock that read, together with their parents, Arthur and Margaret Sterling. My phone blew up. It was a Tuesday evening. I was at my apartment. I still kept my place in the city for late work nights, packing up some final boxes to move into the house Sarah and I had bought. There was a banging on the door. Not a knock. Pounding. I looked through the peephole. My blood ran cold. It was Linda, my mother. She looked deranged. Her hair was windblown, her coat was buttoned wrong. She was holding a crumpled piece of paper, my wedding invitation. I debated not opening it, but I knew she would scream until the neighbors called the police. I took a deep breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened the door. "What are you doing here?" I asked calmly. I didn't step back. I blocked the doorway. "You ungrateful little bastard," she shrieked. She tried to push past me, but I stood like a stone wall. "Who are these people? Who are Arthur and Margaret Sterling?" "They are my parents," I said. "I am your mother," she screamed, her face turning blotchy red. "I gave birth to you. I raised you. How dare you send an invitation to Patricia and not us? And why does it say their names? Because they are paying for the wedding." I lied partially. I was paying for half. They paid the other half. "And because they treat me like a son." "Is this about the money?" Linda sneered. Her eyes darted around my apartment, taking in the high-end packing boxes, the expensive furniture I had acquired. "Did you find yourself a sugar daddy? Is that it? You sold yourself to some rich old couple. Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Lucas told me you were doing well," she spat. "We saw your name in the paper about the park project. We were going to call you, you know. We were going to forgive you for Thanksgiving." "Forgive me?" I laughed. It was a bitter, jagged sound. "You banned me from coming home, Mom. You chose Lucas's stress over me. That was years ago. Get over it." She waved her hand dismissively. "Your brother is in trouble, Elijah. Real trouble. The SEC is investigating his firm. He might lose the house. He needs family. And here you are, playing house with strangers." "I am not playing," I said. "And Lucas's problems are his own, just like my success is my own." She held up the invitation again, shaking it in my face. "I want an invitation. Your father is heartbroken. He's crying in the car right now." "Then tell him to drive home," I said. "You aren't invited, Linda. Neither is Robert. Neither is Lucas." Her face went deadly still. "If you don't invite us, if you embarrass us like this, I will make sure everyone knows what a terrible son you are. I will write to your clients. I will ruin you." I looked at her, really looked at her. I didn't see a mother. I saw a desperate, sad bully. "You can't ruin me," I said softly, "because I'm not Elijah Thatcher anymore." "What does that mean?" "It means you have no power here. Now, leave my property before I call the police. And trust me, I have a very good lawyer in the family now." I slammed the door in her face. I leaned against the wood, listening. I heard her scream a curse word, kick the door once, and then the sound of her heels clicking away down the hallway. I slid down to the floor. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From adrenaline. I had done it. I had stood up to the monster under my bed. I pulled out my phone and called security for the wedding venue. "Double the guard," I told them. "And I need to give you 3 names and photos to put on the do not admit list." I thought that was the end of it. I thought a locked door and a security list would be enough. But I underestimated the audacity of the Thatchers. They didn't just want to attend the wedding. They wanted to reclaim their property. And they were going to wait until the most public moment possible to do it. The day of the wedding was perfect. A clear, crisp June afternoon in Napa Valley. We had flown everyone out to a vineyard estate. It was elegant, smelling of jasmine and aged oak. I stood at the altar in my tuxedo, watching Sarah walk down the aisle. She looked like an angel. Arthur walked her down, beaming with pride. When he reached me, he didn't just hand her over. He hugged me. "Take care of her, son," he whispered. "With my life," I promised. The ceremony was beautiful. We exchanged vows we had written ourselves. I promised to build a home where no one would ever feel like a backup plan. Sarah promised to always be my shelter. Then came the reception. It was held in a massive glass-walled pavilion overlooking the vines. Chandeliers sparkled overhead. Waiters moved silently with trays of champagne. We were sitting at the head table, Sarah and I in the center, Arthur and Margaret to my right. The room was filled with 200 guests. Colleagues, friends, Sarah's extended family. It was a room full of love. I was just taking a sip of water when I saw the commotion at the back entrance. 2 security guards were blocking the door, but they were being shoved aside. It was them. Lucas was in the lead, wearing a suit that was too shiny, looking manic. Linda was behind him in a white dress. Yes, she wore white to my wedding. Robert trailed behind, looking at the floor. "Let them in," I said into the small microphone clipped to my lapel. We had radios for the planner. Sarah grabbed my hand under the table. "Elijah, no. Let them in," I repeated to the head of security, who was looking at me for a signal. "If we kick them out now, they'll make a scene outside and scream. Let them in. Let them see." I signaled to the planner. "Put them at table 19. Table 19 was the overflow table. It was in the far back corner, next to the kitchen swinging doors, exactly where I had sat at Harborview Grill 5 years ago. Poetic justice. The Thatchers marched in like they owned the place. Linda scanned the room, her eyes hungry. She saw the opulence, the expensive flowers, the well-dressed guests. She saw the wealth she felt entitled to. They sat down at table 19. I saw Lucas arguing with a waiter, probably demanding better wine. I didn't look at them. I focused on my wife. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked. "I'm perfect," I said. "Watch this." The MC, a close friend of mine named Dave, stepped up to the microphone in the center of the dance floor. "Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention, please?" The room quieted. Glasses clinked as people toasted. "Before we cut the cake," Dave said, his voice booming, "the groom would like to say a few words about family." I stood up. I took the wireless mic. I walked to the center of the floor. I could feel Linda's eyes boring into me from the back of the room. She was sitting up straighter, expecting me to acknowledge them. Expecting the groveling apology. Expecting the welcome to my parents. "Family," I began, my voice steady. For a long time, I didn't know what that word meant. I thought it meant obligation. I thought it meant being a punching bag for someone else's stress. I thought it meant being invisible until someone needed to borrow money. I saw Lucas stiffen. But then, I continued looking at table 1. 5 years ago, on a Thanksgiving where I was eating alone, strangers invited me to their table. They didn't want anything from me. They just didn't want me to be lonely. I turned to Arthur and Margaret. They taught me that family is a verb. It's what you do. It's showing up. I took a deep breath. This was it. The payoff moment. So, today I want to make a special introduction. There are some people here who think they are my parents because of biology. I glanced briefly at the back corner. The room followed my gaze. Linda looked confused. "But biology is just chemistry. Love is a choice." I signaled to the MC. Dave took over. "Ladies and gentlemen, please raise your glasses for the legal parents of the groom, the people who officially adopted him this year, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Sterling." The room exploded. It wasn't just polite applause. It was a roar. Everyone knew the story. Everyone knew Arthur. They cheered. Arthur stood up and waved, tears streaming down his face. Margaret blew me a kiss. And then I heard it, a screech from the back of the room. "No!" Linda was on her feet. She pushed a waiter aside, knocking a tray of drinks over. Crash. "This is a lie!" she screamed, marching toward the dance floor. The room went dead silent. The band stopped playing. Lucas followed her, looking like a cornered rat. Robert stayed seated, burying his head in his hands. Linda reached the edge of the dance floor. She pointed a shaking finger at Arthur. "You stole my son," she yelled. "You rich, arrogant thieves. You can't just adopt a grown man. That's kidnapping. That's fraud." Arthur stepped down from the head table. He didn't look angry. He looked like a judge passing a sentence. "Mrs. Thatcher," Arthur said, his voice calm but projecting to the rafters. "It is neither fraud nor kidnapping. It is the law. Elijah petitioned the court. We accepted. He is a Sterling now, legally and emotionally. He is a Thatcher." Lucas shouted, stepping up beside his mother. He owes us. We raised him. You think you can just walk away, Elijah? After everything we did for you? I stepped forward. I stood toe-to-toe with my brother. What did you do for me, Lucas? I asked quietly. The microphone picked up every breath. Did you come to my graduation? No. Did you call me when I started my business? No. You only called when you needed money for your divorce lawyer or to cover your gambling debts. I am your brother. Lucas spat. No, I said. You're a genetic coincidence. A brother protects you. You just used me as a shield for your own failures. And you, I turned to Linda. You wore white to my wedding. You came here uninvited to make a scene because you couldn't stand that I was happy without you. You didn't come to celebrate me. You came to claim ownership. Well, I'm not property, Linda. I'm a man. And I choose them. I pointed to the Sterlings. I choose the people who chose me. Linda looked around the room. She saw hundreds of faces staring at her with disgust. She saw the security guards closing in. Robert, she shrieked, looking back at table 19. Do something. Tell him. My father stood up slowly. He walked toward us. He looked old, so much older than I remembered. He stopped in front of me. The room held its breath. Dad, I said. Don't. He looked at Linda. Then he looked at Lucas. Then he looked at me. Robert's voice broke. I think we should go, Linda. What? Linda gasped. We aren't wanted here, Robert whispered. And we don't deserve to be here. Speak for yourself, Lucas yelled. I'm not leaving until I get my share. He's rich now. He owes the family. That was the nail in the coffin. Everyone heard it. It was always about the money. Arthur signaled security. Get them out. Now. For large men moved in. They grabbed Lucas by the arms as he flailed. They escorted a sobbing, screaming Linda toward the exit. This isn't over, she screamed as she was dragged out. You'll regret this. Robert walked behind them. He paused at the door, looked back at me one last time, and then disappeared into the night. The silence in the room was heavy. Then, Sarah stepped up next to me. She took the microphone. Well, she said, her voice shaking slightly but smiling. Now that the trash has been taken out, who wants cake? Laughter rippled through the room. Nervous at first, then genuine. The band started playing Signed, Sealed, Delivered. The party restarted. But I stood there for a moment, watching the empty door. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't hurting. The infection was gone. The wound had been cauterized. I turned back to my wife, my parents, and my friends. Let's dance, I said. The adrenaline of the confrontation carried me through the rest of the reception. We danced, we drank, we laughed. But as the night wound down and the guests began to filter out to the shuttles, reality set in. It was 1 a.m. Sarah was upstairs in the bridal suite changing out of her gown. I walked out to the parking lot to get some air. The vineyard was quiet now, the crickets chirping in the cool California air. I saw a lone figure sitting on a bench near the valet stand. It was Robert. My first instinct was to turn around and go back inside. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want the excuses. But something made me stop. Maybe it was the slump of his shoulders. Maybe it was the fact that he was alone. Linda and Lucas were nowhere to be seen. I walked over. The gravel crunched under my dress shoes. He looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. He was holding an unlit cigarette, rolling it between his fingers. They left, he said. His voice was raspy. Linda and Lucas. They took the rental car. They were screaming at each other, blaming each other. I told them to go. Why are you still here, Robert? I asked. I didn't call him Dad. Couldn't. I wanted to apologize, he said. He didn't stand up. He just stared at the cigarette. I know it's too late. I know that. It is too late, I said. About 20 years too late. I was a coward, he admitted. With your mother, she has this way. She makes you feel like if you don't agree with her, the world will end. And Lucas, he was always so needy. We spent all our energy propping him up because we knew he was weak. We let you fall because we knew you were strong. I let out a short, disbelief laugh. That's your excuse? You neglected me because I was strong. It's not an excuse, he said, tears finally spilling over. It's a confession. We punished you for being capable. We took from you to give to him because we knew you'd survive. But we never stopped to ask if you were happy. He looked at me then, a raw, broken look. When I saw that man, Arthur, stand up for you, when I saw him look at you with that pride, I realized I've never looked at you that way. And it killed me, Elijah. Killed me. I stood there, looking at the man who had given me half his DNA and none of his time. Part of me wanted to hug him. Part of me wanted to scream. I appreciate you saying that, I said finally. But an apology doesn't fix the foundation, Robert. You watched them tear me down for years. You watched Linda ban me from Thanksgiving. You watched Lucas steal my childhood. And you sat behind your newspaper. I know, he sobbed. I know. I'm glad you know, I said. But I'm a Sterling now, and I have a wife to get back to. You should call an Uber. I turned around and walked away. I didn't look back. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, walking away from a crying old man. But it was necessary. I was setting a boundary. I was breaking the cycle. The next few weeks were a blur of honeymoon bliss and legal paperwork. We went to Bora Bora. We turned off our phones. For 10 days, the Thatchers didn't exist. When we got back, reality was waiting. But this time, the dynamic had shifted. The power balance had flipped completely. Lucas tried to reach out. Not to me, but to Arthur. I was at Arthur's office one afternoon. He was helping me review some contracts for my business, when his secretary buzzed in. Mr. Sterling, she said. There is a Mr. Lucas Thatcher on line 1. He says it's urgent regarding an investment opportunity. Arthur looked at me. He raised an eyebrow. Put him on speaker, Arthur said. Mr. Sterling. Lucas's voice came through, slick and desperate. So glad to connect. First off, apologies for the little misunderstanding at the wedding. Family passion, you know? Emotions run high. What do you want, Mr. Thatcher? Arthur asked, his voice like ice. Well, sir, I know you're a man of business. I have a fantastic opportunity in a tech startup. Guaranteed 20% return. I thought, since we're practically family now. Couldn't believe it. The delusion. The audacity. Arthur laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. Mr. Thatcher, Arthur said. Let me be crystal clear. We are not family. We are not practically anything. You abused my son for 3 decades. If you ever contact me, my wife, or Elijah again, I will file a restraining order so fast your head will spin. And I still have plenty of friends on the bench who would love to hear about your SEC audit issues. Silence on the other end. Do not call here again. Arthur hung up. He looked at me and winked. That felt good. You have no idea, I said. But the real divorce from the family happened quietly. I changed my number. I blocked their emails. I unfriended the flying monkeys, the cousins and aunts, except Patricia, who tried to guilt-trip me. I built a wall, not to keep people out, but to keep the peace in. One evening, about a month after the wedding, I was sitting in my new living room with Sarah. We were looking at the wedding photos. There was one photo the photographer had captured perfectly. It was during the toast. I was raising my glass, looking at Arthur and Margaret. They were looking at me with pure, unadulterated love. In the background, out of focus, you could see the blurry backs of the Thatchers being let out by security. It was a masterpiece. You know, Sarah said, tracing my face in the photo. You look different here. Different how? Lighter, she said. Like you aren't carrying a backpack full of rocks anymore. I put it down, I said, kissing her hand. I finally put it down. 1 year later. There is a specific kind of silence that I never knew existed until this year. Growing up in the Thatcher house, silence was a weapon. It was the heavy, suffocating air before a storm, the tension of my mother giving me the silent treatment, or my father hiding behind his newspaper to avoid confrontation. Silence meant danger. But now, standing in my own kitchen on a Tuesday morning, listening to the coffee maker hiss and gurgle, I realized silence could be peace. Could be the sound of a life that isn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. My life had transformed in ways that felt almost dreamlike, yet were grounded in the solid reality of hard work. The Central Park project was finished. It was a masterpiece of urban renewal, green spaces reclaiming concrete, walking paths weaving through what used to be industrial decay. I had stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony next to the mayor, and when I looked out into the crowd, I didn't search for Linda or Robert. I looked for Sarah, who was standing in the front row, her hand resting on her stomach, beaming at me. We had bought a house in the suburbs, a 1920s colonial that needed a lot of love. It was perfect. I spent my weekends refinishing floors and replanting the garden, turning the neglected soil into something vibrant. But as Newton's third law states, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. As my life ascended, the life I left behind was in freefall. The news about Lucas didn't come from a family text. Came from the Wall Street Journal. I was sitting in Arthur's study one evening, playing our weekly game of chess, when Arthur slid the newspaper across the mahogany desk. He didn't say a word. He just tapped the headline on page before. CFO of Vertex Holdings indicted in massive embezzlement scheme. I picked it up. My hands didn't shake. I felt a strange, detached curiosity. The article detailed how Lucas Thatcher, the chief financial officer, had been cooking the books for 3 years to cover personal gambling debts and a lavish lifestyle that far exceeded his salary. The SEC investigation, the stress my mother had used as an excuse to ban me from Thanksgiving, had concluded. Lucas was looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison. He lost the house, Arthur said softly, moving his knight. The bank foreclosed on it yesterday, and his wife, the second one, she filed for divorce this morning. She's going for full custody. I stared at the photo of my brother in the paper. He looked haggard. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the terrified look of a man who realized the rules finally applied to him. And my parents? I asked. They leveraged their retirement fund to pay his bail, Arthur said. They are likely going to lose their home too. They bet on the wrong horse, Elijah. I put the paper down. A year ago, this news would have broken me. I would have felt guilty, felt the need to rush in and save them. I would have been the dutiful scapegoat, offering up my own stability to fix their mess. But not today. Check, I said, moving my rook. Arthur smiled, a genuine, proud smile. Checkmate in 3 moves. You're getting dangerous, son. That evening, when I got home, there was a letter in the mailbox. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was jagged, frantic. Linda. I stood by the trash can in the garage. My thumb hovered over the seal. Sarah came out holding a mug of tea. She saw the envelope and knew. You don't have to read it, she said. I know, I replied, but I need to know if they've changed. Just once. I opened it. Elijah, I hope you're happy. Your brother is being persecuted by the government, an innocent man destroyed by jealous people, and where are you? Living in your mansion with those people who stole you. We are losing everything. Your father is back at work at 68 years old because we gave everything to help Lucas's legal defense. This is your fault. If you had helped him when we asked, if you hadn't caused so much drama at the wedding and humiliated us, maybe things would be different. You brought this bad karma on this family. If you have a shred of decency left, you will call us. We need money, Elijah, not charity. What is owed to us after we raised you? Mom, I read it twice. The gaslighting was breathtaking. Even now, with Lucas facing prison for stealing, she blamed me. She blamed the wedding. She blamed karma. She took zero responsibility. What does it say? Sarah asked gently. Nothing new, I said. Just a reminder of why I left. I took a lighter from the workbench, the one I used to light the grill. I held the corner of the letter and flicked the flame. We watched the paper curl and blacken. The words bad karma and owed to us turned into ash and floated down to the concrete floor. I feel nothing, I whispered. Sarah, I feel absolutely nothing. That's not nothing, she said, resting her head on my shoulder. That's freedom. But the real turning point of that year wasn't the destruction of the old. It was the creation of the new. A few months later, we were painting the nursery. We had chosen a soft sage green. The room smelled of fresh paint and hope. Sarah was sitting in the rocking chair, directing me as I taped off the trim. She was 8 months pregnant. A little to the left, she pointed. You missed a spot near the window. I am a professional architect. I laughed, wiping sweat from my forehead. I think I can handle a paint roller. You're an architect, not a painter. There's a difference. Arthur walked in then, carrying a toolbox. He had insisted on building the crib himself. He was wearing his weekend clothes, an old flannel shirt and jeans that were stiff with starch. How's the air coming along? Arthur asked, looking at Sarah's belly. He's kicking like a soccer player, Sarah groaned. Or a ninja. Arthur knelt down and opened his toolbox. He started laying out the pieces of the crib. I sat down on the floor to help him. For a while, we worked in that comfortable silence. The only sound the twisting of screwdrivers and the click of wood snapping into place. Elijah, Arthur said, not looking up. There's something I've been meaning to tell you. Something Margaret and I have kept to ourselves. What is it? I asked, pausing with a screw in my hand. 5 years ago, he began. About a week after we met you at the restaurant. Do you remember landing that first big commercial contract? The corporate plaza renovation. Yeah, I said. That was the job that saved my firm. I was about to go under before that. The client called me out of the blue. It wasn't out of the blue, Arthur said. He finally looked at me. I played golf with the CEO of that company. I told him I knew a young landscape architect who had more integrity in his pinky finger than most firms have in their entire boardroom. I told him to hire you. I stared at him. You? You got me that job? But we had only met once. I knew enough, Arthur said. But that's not all. The loan you got approved for the following year? The one for the equipment? I co-signed it as a silent guarantor. The bank didn't tell you because I asked them not to. My mouth fell open. Arthur, why? Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to think it was charity, he said firmly. And I didn't want you to feel indebted. I wanted you to build your confidence. I knew you could do the work. You just needed a door to be opened. You're the one who walked through it, Elijah. You did the work. I just held the door ajar. I felt tears prick my eyes. I thought about my biological father, Robert, who wouldn't even pay for a bus ticket for me to come home, who asked me for money for Lucas every chance he got. And here was Arthur, a man who had secretly used his reputation and his wealth to lift me up, asking for nothing in return, not even credit. You believed in me? I choked out, before I even believed in myself. That's what a father does, Arthur said simply. He picked up the crib railing. Now hand me that hex key. This baby isn't going to sleep on the floor. I handed him the tool, but I couldn't stop the wave of emotion. I leaned over and hugged him, right there on the drop cloth covered in green paint speckles. He hugged me back, smelling of sawdust and old spice. Thank you, I whispered. You're welcome, son, he said. Now let's finish this crib. Your mother is bringing over lasagna, and if we aren't done, she'll lecture us both. That night, lying in bed next to Sarah, feeling the baby move against my hand, I realized something profound. Lucas had spent his whole life chasing an inheritance he thought he deserved. He cheated, he stole, he manipulated. And in the end, he ended up with nothing. I had spent my life thinking I was worth nothing. I expected nothing. And by simply being honest, by being brave enough to eat alone that one Thanksgiving, I had inherited the world. This Thanksgiving again. 5 years to the day since I sat alone at Harborview Grill. The house is filled with the smell of roasting turkey, sage stuffing, and Margaret's famous pecan pie. The air is warm and thick with laughter. I am standing at the head of the dining table in our home. It's a long table made of reclaimed oak. I built it myself. There are 12 people seated. Arthur is at the far end, wearing a ridiculous turkey-themed tie. Margaret is next to him, holding a glass of Chardonnay, laughing at something Ben is saying. Aunt Patricia drove down from Connecticut. She's sitting next to Sarah, looking happier than I've ever seen her. And in the high chair right next to me is Leo, my son. He's 10 months old. He has Sarah's green eyes and my messy hair. He's currently trying to smear mashed potatoes into his ear. I tap my glass with a fork. The room quiets down. Speech, Ben yells. All right, I say, smiling. I look around the room. I look at the faces of the people who saved me, the chosen family. 5 years ago, I begin, my voice catching slightly. I was sitting in a restaurant about 10 miles from here, watching a family eat dinner. I was crying into a napkin because I thought I had lost everything. I thought I was unlovable. Sarah reaches out and squeezes my hand. I didn't know that the family I was watching would become my family. I didn't know that the kindness of strangers would heal a lifetime of wounds. I look down at Leo, who is now banging his spoon on the tray. I made a promise to myself back then. I say, looking at my son, that if I ever had a family of my own, no one would ever have to guess where they stood. No one would ever be the drama. No one would be the scapegoat. I raise my glass. So here is to the people who show up. Here is to the parents who choose to love, not just the ones who share DNA. And here is to table 19 at Harborview Grill. Best seat in the house. Here, Arthur booms. We drink. We eat. The noise level rises. It's chaotic. It's messy. It's perfect. Later that night, after the guests have left and the dishwasher is humming its rhythmic song, I hold Leo in the rocking chair in the nursery. The room is dim, lit only by a nightlight. He's asleep, his heavy little head resting on my chest. I can feel his heartbeat against mine. I think about Lucas sitting in a cell or a halfway house somewhere. I think about Linda and Robert, probably sitting in a silent, small apartment, blaming the world for their misfortune. I don't feel anger anymore. I don't even feel pity. They are just characters in a book I finished reading a long time ago. I kiss Leo's forehead. You will never have to earn my love, Leo. I whisper into the dark. You don't have to be a genius or an artist or an athlete. You just have to be you. I will never make you compete for my affection. I will never choose someone else's comfort over your existence. He sighs in his sleep, a sound of pure contentment. I realized then that revenge isn't about shouting at people at a wedding. It isn't about legal victories or seeing your enemies fall. Real revenge is being happy. Real revenge is breaking the cycle. Real revenge is loving your child in the way you wished you had been loved, and watching that love grow into something beautiful. I am Elijah Sterling. I am a father. I am a son. And for the first time in my life, I am exactly where I am supposed to be. We often think of family as a permanent, unchangeable fact, like gravity. But this journey taught me that family is actually an agreement. It's a recurring contract of mutual respect, care, and love. When one side breaks that contract repeatedly, the other side has every right to walk away. There is a powerful lesson here about the sunk cost fallacy. We stay in toxic relationships with parents, siblings, or partners because we've already invested so much time. We think, but it's my mom, or it's my brother. We fear the unknown of being alone more than we fear the known pain of being mistreated. But my story is proof that the unknown is where the magic happens. If I hadn't been forced into that solitude at the airport, if I hadn't been stripped of my safety net, I never would have found the strength to sit at that restaurant table. I never would have met the Sterlings. You have to be willing to lose the life you thought you were supposed to have to find the life that is waiting for you. So, I have a question for you. Is there a Table 19 moment in your life? A moment where you were rejected, only to find something better waiting around the corner? Or maybe you are currently struggling with the guilt of setting boundaries with a toxic family member. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below with your story, or share a piece of advice that helped you get through it. Or, if this story simply reminded you that you are worthy of love just as you are, just type good in the comments. Seeing that word tells me that we are on the same wavelength, that you value these lessons of self-worth and chosen family as much as I do. Thank you for listening. You are seen, you are valid, and you are never, ever truly alone.